I'm Ashley Malik, and I help midlife moms to feel amazing using nutrition and mindset strategies that give you the healthy, happy, and confident life you've been striving for. After losing 65 pounds in perimenopause, tackling gut health issues, and surviving breast cancer, I've learned that health and wellness is so much more than just gathering information. Learning to rewire your brain and your thoughts lets you take all that valuable information and put it into action so that you actually get results. Here, you'll get strategies for eating healthy food without feeling deprived, systems for making nutrition work for you and your family, and steps to rewire your brain so that you never have to rely on motivation again. If you're ready to be healthy, have more energy, and thrive in midlife, you're in the right place. This is the Family Fork Podcast. Hello there, my friend, and welcome back to the Family Fork. I am so glad you're here today because I have a conversation that I think is going to stop you in your tracks in like a really good way. So today I'm sitting down with Jill McMahon, a trauma and grief specialist with over 25 years of experience working with people through some of life's most devastating moments. But what we're talking about today isn't just for people who have experienced a major catastrophic event. It's actually for you, the woman who has been quietly carrying the weight of chronic stress, that heavy invisible load, the sleepless nights, that never-ending to-do list for years and maybe even decades. Here's what Jill and I are going to talk about today that I know is going to truly shift your perspective. Your body does not know the difference between surviving a traumatic event and living in chronic stress for 10 years. And that distinction, it changes everything about how we understand our health, our hormones, and honestly, why midlife can feel so incredibly hard. So whether you think trauma applies to you or not, I promise you, you are going to want to hear this episode. So let's dive in. Jill, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Yay.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and really how you came to be an expert in trauma.
So I am a trauma and grief specialist, Ashley. Very finite and unusual niche that I have chosen to go down. What I really have specialized in for the last 20 or 25 years is loss to suicide. So I'm a suicide bereavement specialist. Not where I saw myself going when I was in graduate school, but really feel like the work found me. And so I have been sitting in stories and pools of trauma and grief for a long time now. And I've worked with thousands of people. And I will always say that they have taught me what I know about trauma. It's not reading a book or a professor lecturing. It's really been the individuals that are impacted.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's sometimes that experience gives you more than you could ever read in a book or a story. So,
Absolutely.
but speaking of books, you're an author, a published author. Tell us a little bit about your book.
I am. So, I am a gun violence survivor. Actually, my mom and I were kidnapped when I was 6. We were carjacked when I was 6. And, I feel like I've healed really well from that. I've done all of my work. You have to do your work in graduate school before they'll give you that license to go out and help other people, which is as they should. And kind of in what I'm going to consider my final season of life. For your listeners, I'm 54 years old. I've decided that I really wanted to do something with that personal experience and that personal trauma to try to make an impact out into the world. So yes, I've spent the last 25 years sitting with individuals that are bereaved by suicide, responding to the scene of suicides, getting support to survivors as quickly as we possibly can. But I've pivoted somewhat and have decided that I really am passionate about getting support to gun violence survivors as well. So I released a book last year called Bulletproof: Healing After Gun Violence and Trauma.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think, Ashley, you would agree, as I hope anybody listening would, that we have a population that's growing in this country, specifically, unfortunately. And I'm not sure that we're equipped to support them in the way that's most beneficial. So that's why I wrote the book. It's been a
Yeah.
journey.
And I'm so glad you did. I think it's something that, like we were talking about before we pressed record, like there's a lot of things that people aren't talking about. And it is really important to start bringing those conversations to the forefront. And we talked a little bit at my dad's memorial service recently, and I know your scope of focus is a little bit different than what my listeners might be used to hearing. But one of the things that we were talking about is this notion of trauma. And
Mm.
I also went to grad school and did a lot of healing while I was in grad school before I got my degree. And at that time, years ago, we talked a lot about like big T and little t, like this big trauma, which would be something like, surviving suicide or a victim of gun violence, something like that. But then there's these little t's that maybe are more relatable to a wider audience of women who are listening today. But what was interesting is you said to me, you're like, no, there isn't a big T and a little t. It's all kind of the same thing. So share with us what your definition of trauma is and sort of how listeners can say, oh, yeah, I might actually be experiencing some trauma, even if they're not aware of it.
So that was so sweet of you to quote me so kindly, because I think what I said is big T and little t are bullshit.
Yes, you did.
Be honest. Let's just call it out for what it is.
Yes.
Um, I appreciate that my field has attempted to delineate a catastrophic event versus a stressful event, right? I understand what they're trying to do there, but what's really important is that it's not the trauma event itself that matters, Ashley. It's how your body responds to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so by using terms that we have been taught for decades, big T and little t, I think all we're doing is creating a scale to judge trauma. Whereas the work you're doing is so powerful because you are helping women like me, right? Women like us, just acknowledge what is going on in their bodies
Yeah.
and pay attention to how that may have long-term effects that they never realized it possibly could. So trauma is really exposure to any event that disrupts your safety or your worldview. Okay. Trauma usually will create fear, flashbacks, hypervigilance of some sort, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, or maybe fear in long distance driving when you never feared long distance driving before. If you haven't heard from your child in 2 hours, starting to panic and or life 360 their phone to find out where they are. I know that I'm speaking to most of us. Avoidance of areas or topics or graphic images, avoidance of difficult conversations, or numbness.
Mm-hmm.
Just feeling kind of this sense of numb. So those are common reactions to trauma. But again, I'm going to say the big T's, you just named it. The big T's are surviving a catastrophic car accident.
Yeah.
Being able to walk again when you were told that you're never going to be able to walk again. Having a child, that was a part of a shark accident, being a part of an avalanche, having a gun pointed in your direction, feeling like your life is actually threatened.
Yeah.
Little T, and this is where we're going, is chronic stress. It is divorce. It is being alienated from your business or your business partner or your grandchildren. It is all of those things that people may not identify as trauma, but they are nonetheless traumatic. Now, the important thing, I think, for you, and your listeners is to realize that all of those events can impact the body in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that I have started sharing more on this podcast, but that's actually the deep work that I do when I work with clients, either through my program, the method, or when we work one-on-one is I think we sort of discount this idea that, like, for example, if a woman is trying to lose some weight in perimenopause or menopause and she's really struggling and she has decided to like stop drinking or cut back her calories, and all of a sudden she finds herself saying no to happy hours with her friends or saying no to a barbecue or an event. What's actually happening is that she's feeling this deprivation and this sense of isolation, which in her body, that feels unsafe. And so you
Right.
had said that, like, it's threatening your sense of safety. And so we as women at this age cannot discount the fact that losing weight, trying to manage perimenopause, not sleeping at all, and the effects that come from that, it has an impact on our body, on our nervous system, and that can feel like trauma to your body. I don't want us to
Absolutely.
discount it anymore.
Well, and again, I'm so happy that you have chosen this topic
Yeah.
to just even scratch the surface of, because I do think that education is key, right? I think so many of us hold trauma and we don't identify it as trauma,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we've heard often, we've heard the phrase ACEs. I don't know if all of your listeners have heard the term ACEs, but it's an
Definitely.
adverse childhood experience.
Mhm.
So, and it gets thrown around a lot. Like my ACE score is 7 and my ACE score is 5. And again, it's another way to scale trauma. But what we've been taught forever, or a key phrase that's been thrown around, is I have a high ACE score,
Mhm.
meaning, I was abused as a child, sexually abused, I was neglected as a child. Like I have all of these early childhood experiences. And for some reason, we validate those,
Yeah.
and we should, but we discount a chronic illness, a scary diagnosis,
Mhm.
back to back feelings of hypervigilance, not being able to sleep because of fear, home insecurity for a decade. All of those events to your body, as you just said,
Yeah.
can feel like are traumatic,
Yes.
right? They
Yeah.
just are traumatic. I mean, I'm just going to tell people right away who may think that are so fortunate they've never experienced trauma in their lives. You more than likely have. Not all of you have, but you more than likely have. But your body can't tell the difference between, fearing for its life and being in chronic stress for 10 to 12 years. Your body is going to respond the same. And what I always tell my clients is that trauma and stress takes house in your organs and your joints.
Mm-hmm.
So, unresolved trauma and stress will just set up camp in your shoulder.
Yep.
And you may go to every doctor you can think of. You may go to the chiropractor. You may have scans taken, and none of it will show up, girl. None of it is going to show up. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again, especially in adults over the age of 50.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It
Yeah.
happens to everybody, but over the age of 50, that's when those pains become more chronic, right? You have that back pain that feels like it's liver or kidney. You go in and you do some work. It's trauma that has not been released. It really does set up camp in your body.
It sits in there. Yeah. And it's not, we won't go into this part of that world today, but there's a lot of like somatic healing and different things that can be done to release some of that stress and some of that lack of safety in our bodies. Because I know so many of my listeners are these very like high achieving, I can do it all, type women. And what we have to recognize is that by continuing to do it all, and we like to term it these days as the invisible load. Like,
Mhm.
how many of you listening are know exactly when your kids' dentist appointments are, and you know when you need to bring a treat to school for a birthday, or you need to send a card to the teacher. Like all these little things that we hold on to creates an environment of constant, ongoing, unpredictable stress. And to me, what I've seen in my practice in both myself and with the women that I work with is that it just creates this load where you have a frozen shoulder, you have a back pain, you have a headache that won't go away. It's always there. But that could be the trauma of the unending stress and the chronic stress that you have on your life every single day. And if we're not addressing it, it does not go anywhere.
Okay,
It
girl. So I
just gets
call that,
fixed.
you just nailed it. You just nailed it with your examples. That is average, ordinary, everyday experiences of many of us, right?
Yep.
So when you started out that segment by saying, high achieving women, and I was looking at specifically you and I like, hi,
Yep, us.
hi, we're walking the walk, right? And all of those chronic stressors that you were just describing, that really, let's be honest, they never let up.
No. Mm-mm.
And then once we get good at it, people expect us to
Yes.
continue to be good at it, right?
Yes. And that's the
So
hardest thing because then the load never lets off. It actually intensifies. I don't, my husband and I have been having conversations over the last year or so. And I'm like, I want to write down all the things that I think about in a day. And I want you to do the same exercise. And we'll come back after, a couple of days. And my list, no joke, is like 300 things long. And it's maybe half of what I've thought about or half of what I'm holding in my brain. And he has like 7 things. And I'm like, damn, I would love to have a brain that only has 7 things to think about.
I know.
But it does, it creates this stress. And so we've talked a little bit about it, but like, are there some other things that you see like high blood pressure or anything? Like what other physical manifestations can women sort of look for to say, "Oh, maybe I am actually feeling this trauma of chronic stress."
So oftentimes when we are holding trauma or chronic stress, we notice that our alarm system becomes overactive, right? So the amygdala is this tiny little almond shape center in the middle of your brain, and it's our emotional center. That's where we do most of our feeling. Well, when we live in chronic stress, it becomes on overdrive, and it's always looking for threats, right? I want everybody to remember that your brain's primary job is to protect you at all times.
Yep.
So it will always be on the lookout. But when your motor is functioning as you just described, Ashley, it can't turn itself off. So it's this hypervigilance that is really exhausting. Your memory can feel unpredictable. Now, I don't know how many people are listening to this have experienced it, but I went through several years of it, specifically when I was in perimenopause.
Mhm.
I'm definitely still experiencing it in menopause. It was really heightened during perimenopause, but I was the overachieving, always racing, high drive woman who was also going through a chemical and hormonal change,
Yes.
and I couldn't remember anything,
Yep. Yep.
right? So the hippocampus, another big term, is where we keep our memories. If you've experienced trauma in your life, typically your hippocampus will go dark. Like your brain will intentionally forget certain memories. So ask yourself, if you're listening, if there's part of your childhood you can't remember, if you have difficulty remember certain things that you are not common today, I need to complete this list things, but things that happened in your past and it's
Yep.
frustrating for you. That is your memory going offline. That's what holding trauma does. Your nervous system struggles to reset. So you were just explaining that motor, you get really good at completing that really long list every day of to-do items. Most of them are, behind the scenes, so nobody even knows that you're doing it. Yet
Right.
they come home
And it's
and
all
things
done.
magically put together.
Yeah.
The sheets have been changed,
Yep.
14 appointments have been made, the cat puke has been cleaned up,
Yep.
and
Yep.
dinner is served.
And dinner is served.
And,
Yep.
and you've run a business.
Yeah.
So
And
When that
we wonder as women in this stage of life. I've heard Dr. Mary Claire Haver talks a lot about this, where she's like, it kind of becomes a phase of life where you're like, I'm not going to take this bullshit anymore. I don't want to do it. And there are some hormonal changes that are happening in our body that actually take us to this point where we say, I can't do this anymore. I can't hold this load anymore. And it's too exhausting. And we start to recognize that. But sometimes I think the damage is already done. It's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things, this idea of like hypervigilance. And I remember a couple of years ago. So if you have been listening to the podcast for a while, you will know I'm very open about my past history with my ex-husband. And he was a gambling addict and an alcoholic. And I was in a really abusive situation. And so remember that your ACEs that Jill talked about, those adverse childhood experiences, it doesn't have to be in childhood. It can also be in adulthood. So do recognize that. But I went through a phase of life where somebody would come up behind me and I wouldn't, I'd maybe have one earbud in or something, or I was really focused and they would touch me and I would fly to the roof. I would get so startled. So I think our body,
Yeah,
like we keep saying, the body keeps score, which is a great book, actually, if you haven't
great
read
book.
it. But
Great book.
the body is sort of holding on to the things that maybe you are not recognizing, that you are pushing aside, that have gone dark for you, and that can really have a negative effect on your health, on your mental health, and how we all go into this phase of life hoping that we live a long and happy life and get to see our grandkids and play with our grandkids and whatnot. And we have to make sure that our nervous system and our mental health is in a good place so that we can actually get there and be healthy when we get to that phase.
Amen, girl.
Yep.
Amen.
So
You know,
let's,
you
oh, go
you
ahead.
you brought up something that I thought was really interesting when you were speaking about your previous relationship with which by the way, I knew Ashley then, right? This
We've
conversation
known
for
each
us,
other.
it's really full circle because we
Yeah.
haven't seen each other in years and years. We've probably known each other since we were 22, maybe 23 in some realm, right? So, from the peripheral view, I've seen many seasons of your
Mhm.
life. And I love that you use that as a real life example to others that maybe don't feel like there is someone else that is safe enough in their life to share those things with, but it makes you one of us, I will say, which I love. So, in
Thank you.
preparing for our chat today, my friend, um, I did some research and I found that there had been this study by the American Journal of Managed Care that was released in 2025 on trauma and menopausal women.
Oh,
And, you just listed at least three different ways in which you've experienced trauma in your life,
yeah.
right? What I would love the listeners to hear and realize is that the study showed that 70% of women experience some form of trauma in their lives.
Wow.
70%, right? So when you're talking about specifically women that are our age, they're
Mhm.
going through the big change. Isn't that
Yeah.
fun?
Yeah.
Um, that's already a time of accelerated cellular change in our life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So what this study, this 2025 study, and to me it was really important that it was a current study
Yes.
because I
Yep.
think that the way that we study things is really improving. And thank goodness,
Yes.
partially due to Dr. Mary Claire,
Yep.
a lot of this is getting as much attention as it is. But what it showed is that the menopausal body that is also has a history of trauma has an amplified change,
Mm.
right? So the other 30% that haven't experienced trauma in their lives will go through the more traditional, typical biological change. If you are storing or holding trauma, which we just said at the beginning of our chat today, could be a myriad of things. It's not looking
Wow.
down the barrel of a gun, right? It could be a myriad of things. Those menopausal conditions are amplified for you. What the study also said, which I thought was really interesting, is that for those that are holding PTSD, the 70% of those women, that they have more white brain matter,
Mm.
which is leading to poorer cognitive performance.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go back to that. I can't even
Wow.
tell you, girl, how many, it's not even about going to a different room and not remembering why I'm there.
Yeah.
It's about driving to the post office, going into the back seat to grab my box and realizing that it's at home on
It's
the
not
kitchen
there.
table. I mean,
Yeah.
those are missing a meeting on my calendar. I am sorry. I am flawed. I will admit that. That is a daily or weekly occurrence
Yeah.
with me,
Yes.
right? And another one that I thought was really interesting is that women that have experienced two or more trauma exposures in
Mhm.
their life can biologically add 2 years to their age.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't love that.
I don't love that either,
I don't love
right?
that.
But there are ways around it. I mean, you've been saying it this entire time. It's just about resetting your nervous system, giving yourself grace, realizing that your body isn't responding in a certain way, not because you're not following the plan
Yes.
or you're
Yeah.
not doing anything appropriately, but because it's
Yeah.
it's protecting you from something that is unresolved. So go and clean it out. Clean
Yeah.
it out.
This is you said it so perfectly because this is a mission of mine this year is to help women recognize that sure, menopause is a biological change, but what I'm learning as I go through it, because I was put in medically induced menopause after my breast cancer treatment, and I am uncovering that there's so much more to it than that. And I think as women, again, high achievers, we usually DIY whatever it is and we just take care of business when it comes to understanding how our body has been treated for our first 40 or 50 years, the traumatic events, whatever that looks like to you, and then the hormonal shifts that occur as a result of peri and menopause, we have to start understanding that it's not our fault. You
Yeah.
said to give ourselves grace, and I think we need so much more than that. We are not at fault here. There are a lot of things that have been working against us. You know, I just read this the other day. Women were not included in research studies for medications and different treatments until 1993.
Crazy.
Hello. Like, this is
Crazy.
in our lifetime. I was graduating from high school in 1993. And
None
so,
of those medicines were made for us, girl. They were
no,
made for men.
yes, that is exactly it. And so there has been decades of stuff that has worked against us in, women getting back to the workforce, but also having to take care of children at home and, medicines only being tested on men, but given to women being told, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, or this is just what happens when you get older. This is such a great time to be a woman and to be alive and to have a voice to say, my whole life, there have been things that have been happening and occurring to me that have changed my biology, my physiology, my nervous system. And then when you get to menopause and you want to drop a few pounds or you want to stop forgetting, you know, your calendar dates or the box that goes to the post office, we have to stop being so hard on ourselves and we have to recognize that it is a lifetime, decades of challenges that have been put in front of us as women. And no wonder it feels really hard. No wonder it feels very defeating. And I hear so many women say, I know what I'm supposed to be doing to make myself feel better. I know I'm supposed to, have the protein or walk with the weighted vest or whatever, but I just can't make myself do any of these things. And I'm like, it's because you need a break.
Yeah.
Your nervous system needs to be reset. You need to take a true lifelong deep breath and start healing decades and decades of things that have made it hard for you to live.
Well said.
Mic drop. If you want to know how I feel about
Right
the
there.
decades of life,
Well said.
that is it. That
And
is
it's
it.
okay to acknowledge it. I think we
Yeah.
often, us women, get into a cycle of shame when we slow down.
Mhm.
And where is that going to get you? I mean, I've watched more of my friends fall apart. I lost a coworker who works in the space of suicide bereavement to suicide a number of years ago because the invisible load got too heavy, if you want to know the honest truth. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're actually doing your friends and your family and yourself a favor
Yeah.
to acknowledge that you need to create some change.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with that. And I have heard this term a little bit more recently. I think a younger generation is making it popular, but the idea of being a cycle breaker.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of women who we're having different conversations in popular media, on social media around invisible load and just workload in general as women at this stage in life. And we want to do things differently. So, what are some recommendations that you can give the listeners? How do we start doing that? Because you and I keep saying, like, we just have to regulate the nervous system. Well, what the heck does that mean? And how do you do that? And like, how does one get started in trying to take that deep breath and start addressing some of the feelings, some of the trauma, the chronic stress that we've been experiencing for decades?
Well, okay, first and foremost, I'm going to go with real down home, easy ways to help start you reset your nervous system. Because if we jump into the big things, right, that feels like another task or another chore. So we're not going to do that to ourselves. But I'm going to tell everybody listening that sleep is your best friend. I know you're sick of hearing it. I know everybody is preaching it. But at our stage in life, you need to go back to sleeping more than less. And I don't care if that means you take 20-minute naps in the middle of the day. I had a mentor who used to tell me lack of sleep is the fastest road to insanity.
Hmm. Yep.
It's one of my favorite
I would
phrases.
agree. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so we need it even more now that our body is hyper vigilant, it's in hyperdrive. We have a lot of chemical changes going on. Acknowledge and accept additional sleep in your life. So, because I need you to wake up every morning with some armor on. You
Yeah.
can't think rationally or logically, and you can't respond to the people that you love rationally if you haven't gotten enough sleep. I hope, if anything, we've kind of sparked an interest in your listeners as to what maybe their trauma story is. If they have one, they may not have one. I don't want to create something that doesn't exist. But if we know that 70% of women have experienced trauma of some sort, it could have been that was 30 or 40 years ago and they feel like it's resolved, but it could be taking house in that body.
Yep.
So I'm just going to ask you to, again, set the shame aside and go meet with the mental health professional for 6 sessions. Just clean some of those memories out. I'm a big believer. I call it emptying your trash can.
Yeah.
So, what happens, Ashley, when we all do it again because we're busy, we fill the trash can and we fill the trash can and it gets full. And so then we push it down because we don't have time to take it out
Yeah.
to the bin, right? And then we stomp on it even, like we keep pushing it down. But after that only takes us so far before it's going to billow over and it's going to spill over.
Yeah.
If you get in a habit of emptying your trash can more frequently, it won't billow over.
Mm.
And the billowing over is an emotional breakdown. It's, biting off somebody's head when you don't mean to and feeling horrible about it
I feel like this is one of the
later.
most common things that I see with the women that I talk to is, yes, this like emotional instability is
Right.
what I like to term it, that it's just all of a sudden you're snapping at this, you're snapping at that, you're flipping off the driver who drove by and like cut
Yes.
you off. It's like
Yes. Road rage.
these little moments where you're like, excuse me, this is not who I am, but this is how I'm starting to
Right.
react. And so
Right.
I love that sort of metaphor of I'm notorious for doing that. I'm like, nope, I don't have time to empty the trash can. I have too many things to do. My invisible load list is 300 items long. I'm just going to like put my foot in the trash can, stuff everything down and call it a day. But it always bubbles up.
And I will
Always
say,
comes.
if seeing a counselor feels like it's too much for people, we don't need to make it that complicated, right?
Yeah.
Designate 2 or 3 friends in your life that you can share a little bit with. Maybe not all of it with one person, because again, as women, I understand that feels icky, but a little bit with Sally, a little bit with Susan, a little bit with Tanya, right? Or
Yeah.
write it down. So the same mentor that made that comment about sleep would also say it, write it, or draw it, right? You
Mm.
just have to expel it, you guys. Or again, you're inviting it to take up house
Take
in
up
your
space.
organs
Yep.
and joints, and that is scientifically proven. Another really silly way that most people don't realize that we can attempt to reset our nervous system is to hum or sing.
Yes. I am such a proponent of this. Tell us more because I
It's big
love
stuff.
visual.
So my massage therapist has hummed for years. I've never understood it. Every time I go to get a massage, it's 50 minutes of her humming. I'm like, this is bizarre. Until I saw the study that came across my desk. That vibration resets helps to reset the nervous system. And now it is such a habit of mine. I walk around the house humming. I will vacuum humming. I drive humming. Um, Moving the body. You talked about somatic healing earlier. We're not going to totally get into that, but dancing and yoga and moving the body releases that trauma, that it gets sticky. It really actually physically gets sticky in your joints, moving it around. Sunrise and sunset. Ashley, if your people aren't sunrising and sunsetting,
Mhm.
this is a hill I will die on.
Yep. I
Truly.
agree.
Get up in the morning and face the sun. Even if you can't see it directly from your backyard,
Mhm.
face the sun for 5 to 10 minutes. What it biologically does to your microbiomes and to resetting your nervous system, not only does it reset your circadian rhythm so that you'll sleep better at night, it actually is creating healthier gut microbiomes
Mm. That's
so that because the gut and brain connection are really,
oh, yeah.
really connected. Really, again, it's scientific, y'all. I know it sounds silly.
Yep. Yep.
It's scientifically proven. So, facing the sun for 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, I just grab my cup of coffee and I go out in the backyard with no shoes on and I stand in the grass and I ground
Yes.
and I face the sun. I'm not very good at doing it at sunset because I'm making dinner, but
Yep.
I need to make a better habit about that.
Yes.
And meditation is also another way of resetting your nervous system. I'm always going to suggest counseling. It's not because I'm a therapist, it's because I believe that every human being on this planet has enough that they could share with an objective third party that would be psychologically and biologically beneficial to them. However, if you're not comfortable with that, there were 5 other ways that I
Yeah.
just gave you that you could use to help reset your nervous system.
So many good options. And I thoroughly believe in counseling. I have been seeing a therapist off and on since I was about 7 years old. And I love it. And I'm glad that that was a part of my family culture to be able, because there's one thing to have sort of like a vent session with your girlfriends,
Mhm.
but a counselor, a therapist can be really beneficial in helping you to see some things that are in your way. Like
Yeah.
I do similar coaching when I work with women who are trying to lose weight or trying to get healthier in perimenopause is you can't always see what's standing in front of you.
Yeah.
And so having that objective but skilled third party can be really, really helpful. Meditation, yes. This
Mm.
year, I subscribe to the Calm app, and I love it. Partly because I think Jay Shetty is really handsome, and I listen to all of
Indeed,
his
indeed.
stories, and so that feels really good too. But they have one of the categories that they've opened up this year is binaural sounds. So it's this notion of like hearing something in your right ear, and then your left ear, and then your right ear, and your left ear. And it is proven very similarly to humming to regulate your nervous system. Humming, it's different than singing. So when you hum, it's actually vibrating certain parts of your body in a different way that lets your nervous system know that you are safe. So if you are not humming, I encourage you to just get out there
Mhm.
and hum, 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 hum.
So silly,
It-
but so simple.
yeah, it's so simple. So, Jill, I just cannot thank you enough. So much good information. I hope that listeners leave this conversation feeling validated, feeling heard and understood that there's a lot on our plate these days. And it doesn't have to be one of those major traumatic events to say, I am feeling trauma from the last 10 years of caretaking or raising really difficult teenagers or being in a difficult marriage. All of these things are having an impact on your body. And it's time for us to start recognizing that and doing what we need to do, addressing our nervous system so that we can go through the rest of our lives feeling really healthy. Let's try and take those extra 2 years away so add those 2 years back on so that we can live longer, happier, and healthy lives. So, Jill, let us know a little bit where we can find you and also tell us again about your book. I would love for people to go pick that up as well.
You're so sweet. JillMcMahonCounseling.com has all of the information. Yeah, and please, anybody, I truly mean this. Once you are subjected to hearing me speak, I'm so sorry for you, but you are my friend. So feel free to reach out to me through the website. The book can be found on Amazon, and really, it's for anybody. It's for gun violence survivors, but it's for anybody who has experienced trauma. So there's helpful hints in each chapter on why your body is responding the way it is, how you can help reset your body, how you can support somebody else in your life that has experienced a catastrophic loss or any type of trauma. So thank you for, trusting me, Ashley, and having me on. And it's been so amazing reconnecting with you. I just have to tell you and your listeners that your father is actually the reason that I do what I do and that I am who I am today because of him kind of guiding me into graduate school and telling me that he trusts me and he trusts my skill. I've spent the last 30 years helping other people. So your family is very near and dear to me, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you. That means so much. My dad, I've also shared with listeners, my dad was a big part of my life and he was impactful to everyone he ever met.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that we get to be part of that ripple effect. So thank you. And thanks for joining us today. And we will see you back next week on The Family Fork. Thanks for listening to the Family Fork podcast. I hope today left you inspired and equipped with something tangible that you can put into action today. Remember, success is so much more than just gathering information. You have to put it into action. If this episode resonated with you, here's how you can help the show reach even more midlife moms. Hit follow, share it with a friend who's struggling in midlife too, and if you're feeling generous, leave us a review. Your thoughtful review helps other listeners discover these conversations when they need them the most. This show has become even more than I could have imagined, and it's because of loyal listeners like you who show up and share. You are helping to build this community and movement that will inspire midlife moms for years to come. For show notes, links, and resources, head to ashleymalik.com/podcast. Keep striving for the healthy, energized life that you deserve.